Hello, my name is Fred Morris. I'm here today to talk about the efficacy of endurance training with low carbohydrate availability. That is, why you might reduce carbohydrate availability during training to increase your endurance performance. During this video, we're going to discuss how targeting AMPK by reducing carbohydrate availability can increase training adaptations, before evaluating the effectiveness of two different methods of reducing carbohydrate availability prior to exercise. Cell signaling is the process of how cells adapt to the environment by reacting to the buildup of certain substances. So in this case, the buildup of metabolites during exercise. During endurance exercise, the energy provision is usually provided by the metabolism of glucose. As exercise continues and glucose begins to become scarce as it is used up, the buildup of metabolites, and in particular AMP, activates a key signaling enzyme called AMPK, which triggers a cascade of responses that will eventually lead to the body adapting to endurance exercise. AMPK controls endurance adaptations by activating transcription factors, which control the rate of transcription of DNA into proteins for the relevant endurance adaptations. PGC1 alpha, for example, when activated by AMPK, increases mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the creation of new mitochondria, and also increases the expression of type 1 fibers, which are more resistant to fatigue. AMPK also increases fat metabolism by targeting and activating acetyl-CoA carboxylase, and also increased angiogenesis, which is the creation of more blood vessels and capillaries by targeting of vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF. The metabolism of fat is slower than the metabolism of glucose. However, it releases far more energy than the metabolism of glucose. Therefore, this can be beneficial in endurance activities where the demand of energy is not that urgent. However, overall, it will require more energy. So by using cell signaling and a specific targeting of AMPK by reducing carbohydrate availability, we can specifically target these adaptations. There are two ways you can do that. That's either by restricting your carbohydrate in your diet or using exercise to manipulate the amount of carbohydrate available. Hanson et al., using a within-subject design, manipulated carbohydrate levels by training participants twice every second day. 7 male participants measured the effects of knee extensor training over a 10-week period. In a unique approach to the problem, one leg was designated the high carbohydrate leg and the other leg was designated the low carbohydrate leg. On day one, both legs trained, but in the afternoon, only the low carbohydrate leg trained. The next day, only the high carbohydrate leg trained, and this pattern was repeated for 10 weeks. Max power and endurance at 90% max power was tested before the training intervention and after. And also, throughout the training intervention, the participants were on a controlled diet. The results indicate that after a 10-week training period, there is no significant difference in max power between both legs. However, endurance in the low carbohydrate leg was increased when compared to the high carbohydrate leg. And also, there was an increase in mitochondrial activity, but this was only in the low carbohydrate leg. So in summary, even though endurance at 90% VO2 max was increased in the low carbohydrate leg when compared to the high carbohydrate leg, the results are only limited to untrained athletes, and also leg extensions do not really represent typical endurance training activities such as jogging or cycling, therefore limits its viability. Yao 2008 addressed Hansen 2005's shortcomings by using the same method. However, they used 18 endurance trained cyclists, which were split into two groups. On day one, the high carbohydrate group underwent a training session of 100 minutes on a cycle ergometer, and then the next day they did 8 5-minute high-intensity HIIT sessions. The low-carbohydrate group trained only on one day, and on that day they did 100 minutes on a cycle ergometer, then rested 2 hours, then completed 8 5-minute high-intensity HIIT sessions. The next day they rested, and then they repeated the cycle for the 3-week period. This was to assess if low carbohydrate availability would have any impact on a 60-minute self-paced time trial. Although the results indicated there was increased fat oxidation and mitochondrial enzyme levels were increased in the low carbohydrate group, There was no difference between time trial performance in both groups. There was no effect on time trial performance in endurance trained participants, even though the participants in the low carbohydrate group were showing signs of fat adaptation. The twice-a-day method is a very time-consuming approach. It is much easier to reduce the carbohydrate availability by reducing the amount of carbohydrates in your diet. Lambert et al. 1994 looked at the effects of a low carbohydrate diet versus high carbohydrate diet. They compensated the low carbohydrates by increasing the fat content of the diet. 5 male endurance trained cyclists undertook a crossover trial with 2 weeks low carbohydrate, then 2 weeks normal diet, followed by 2 weeks of a high carbohydrate diet. They resumed normal training all the way through their testing period. Before and after the dieting periods, the participants underwent a lengthy testing procedure. They were characterized as high intensity and low intensity. The high intensity procedure included 5-second Wingate tests for muscular power, then a 10-minute rest, followed by another Wingate test for maximal power output, followed by another 30 minutes rest, before finally completing a cycle to exhaustion at 90% VO2 max. This was followed by the low intensity test. After a 20-minute rest, they completed a cycle to exhaustion at 60% VO2 max. So in summary, the low carbohydrate diet increased the endurance in the low intensity test but had no effect on the high intensity performance. This research, however, was limited by the fact that the intensity was controlled by the researchers. During a race, the intensity is governed by external factors. This suggests that these results are only relevant in a controlled environment. In terms of exercise performance, because this study only compared the effects of a high carbohydrate diet against a low carbohydrate diet, we can't assess the effects of a normal carbohydrate diet versus a low carbohydrate diet. Hideki et al. 1999 used a very different approach to the problem. They compared a low carbohydrate diet against the participants' normal diet. 16 male endurance trained cyclists were split into 2 groups. One group consumed a low carbohydrate diet, and the other group consumed the normal habitual diet for 15 days. At the start of the study, the participants conducted a 2.5-hour cycle at 63% max power. This was immediately followed by a 40-kilometer time trial. This test was repeated every 5 days for the remainder of the study. On the non-testing days, they carried on with their own personal training regime. Although fat oxidation increased in the low carbohydrate diet group, the low carbohydrate diet had no significant effect on their time trial performance. So in summary, a low carbohydrate diet had no effect on self-paced time trial performance. Because the participants didn't have a standardized training regime, it can't be assumed that the lack of performance in the time trial was because of the low carbohydrate diet, because each participant wasn't training at the same standard. However, what it does show is that self-paced performance is not only dictated by substrate utilization. So in summary, from the literature covered, the introduction of carbohydrate restriction increases fat oxidation regardless of method and training status. However, using exercise to restrict carbohydrate levels may only improve endurance in non-endurance trained athletes. However, there appears to be no benefit for endurance trained athletes. Both dietary and exercise carbohydrate restriction has no effect on long duration and self-paced exercise performance. That being said, although there appears to be no benefit for endurance trained athletes, restriction of carbohydrates for non-endurance trained athletes may be beneficial when compared to a high carbohydrate diet. So therefore, there needs to be more research in this vein.